dearest. Here we are now. Think about, analyze, contemplate, internalize these teachings so we can all become these amazing people that the Buddha says we can all become, so we can be a benefit to sentient beings. So let's do our little prayers. Okay. So as always, the first two lines expressing our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and the second two lines expressing this amazing altruistic motivation, goal for doing this, stating our purpose and why we're here together. Listen to these incredible teachings. I mean, not my incredible teachings, but the teachings themselves being so amazing. These amazing skills from this most advanced level of Buddhist teachings to help us quickly become a Buddha. Why? Well, first of all, because it's our nature, no choice about it. But then we're capable of seeing others because we've got perfect wisdom that sees the minds of others, perfect empathy with others, and no sense of a separate self, and the perfect power to do so. That's our job, this is who we really are. So listening to these teachings, even this is 1%, 0.5% of what we hear, that's something useful, that's fantastic. Sangye Cheran, Soke Chognam La, Jancho Badu Jagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chernyan Gipesonam Ki, Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. Sangye Cheran, Soke Chognam La, Jancho Badu Jagni Kyapsu Chi, Dagi Chernyan Gipesonam Ki, Drola Penche Sangye Drupa Shog. I rely upon, until I'm enlightened, I will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So by the virtuous karma of we create by listening to these teachings, because every thought we have sows a seed in the mind, may we become fully developed so we can be a benefit to all sentient beings, just naturally, okay? Thinking like this. Thank you so much. That'll do. Well, I completely forgot what we talked about last week. I didn't record it. I usually record and then I look back at it. And I've got a feeling we talked about, roughly remember what we talked about. I roughly remember what we talked about. So I think just to give us an overview, let's get the overview, okay? When the Lamas teach very traditionally, they will teach first extensively on the topic, then they'll repeat it a second time, slightly shorter, then they'll repeat it a third time, even shorter. So we'll do like that. So we're looking at the teachings known in Sanskrit as the Tantrayana, Vajrayana, Mantrayana, and it's, if we look at the entire packaging of the teachings, if we take Tsongkhapa, our 14th century lineage Lamas, packaging of Buddha's teachings, this experiential package, this course, if we engage in it, we end up graduating as a Buddha. Then this course being gradual, like all courses, then Tantra is postgraduate. Best way to put it, the simplest way to put it is immediate. We understand that. So junior school is the very first level of practice where okay, so the point behind all of Buddha's teachings, the point, whether it's in junior school, high school, university, postgraduate, whatever, the most advanced or the most difficult, the fundamental point that Buddha is making is that we suffer. Sentient beings are in samsara, which is his fancy way of saying we're all suffering, and it's in different levels of suffering, that sentient beings suffer Hang on a minute, I've got to turn this light off. It burns my face. I've got a face problem, skin problem. It burns my face. So I'm being very self-centered here, but you don't need to see me anyway. You can see shining Buddha behind me. Pretend that he's talking, okay? I'm just this kind of like one of those, he's the puppeteer, okay? He's really doing the talking. And I'm just going, blur, okay? So the whole point of all Buddha's teachings, from the Mahayana point of view, from any point of view of Buddha's teachings, is that we all are suffering and that he has found a method to stop suffering. That's it. It's very simple. He's found a method to stop suffering. So obviously, if that's true, we need to first know what suffering is. And you learn about that right at the beginning. You learn the Four Noble Truths. If you look at one way of seeing all of Buddha's teachings, you learn the Four Noble Truths. And so he talks about, first, there is suffering, 3 kinds. Second, the causes, and this is the really crucial point. Third, guess what, folks? You can get rid of them, both suffering and its causes. And the fourth is how to do it, really. That's everything. I mean, if you take this as a broad view of all Buddha's teachings from A to Z, So there are different levels of teachings and different levels of presenting these teachings, and therefore different levels of practices. So the most advanced level is known as Tantra, known as Vajrayana. But obviously, like all levels, all postgraduate in any body of knowledge, you've got to start in junior school, then high school, then university. It's sort of logical. And depending on your skill, you can whiz through it very quickly. Of course you can. I mean, if you've done enough work in the past life, you know, you can whiz through all this stuff when you're a child. It depends on how much we bring with us, how much we've done before. It's pretty obvious. So, okay, so then the way Buddha's talking is, across the board, is that he's discovered, he's identified the main causes of suffering, which is pretty incredible, pretty kind of confidence on him. It's pretty confident of him. I mean, in the West, we say we're still trying to work it all out. We haven't found the causes of all the suffering on the planet yet. We haven't found the answers yet. We say in the West, I'm very happy. I'm happy we're looking. Well, Buddha's telling us 2,500 years ago that he has found it. Now, he's not saying believe him, but he has said it. He's allowed to say he's found the answer. Everybody's allowed to say that, but they have to present their findings, don't they? And then who's going to prove it's true? Nobody but you, babe. This is one of the biggest interesting points. You have to prove it. You have to prove it. 27 other people can prove it, but you have to prove it. Then you know it's true. You can have confidence in it if thousands of people, other people have said they proved it. That gives you confidence. But in the end, you have to prove it to be true. And the only way to do that is engage in it. And that's what practice is. So the Buddha is saying, well, he's found the causes of suffering. And the causes of suffering are two. The main one, they subsume to one. And the one cause of suffering is very simple. It's in our mind. And so that means we have to know what the mind means. We have to know what suffering is. We have to know what the mind is. So mind is not physical. Mind is continuity of consciousness. Mind is not the handiwork of God or Buddha or a creator or mummy or daddy or anything else. It's not a function of the brain. It's not physical. These are the crucial things we have to understand if we want to understand Buddha's view about what suffering is and how to get rid of it. So the fundamental point to understand is the mind, because the mind is where the causes of suffering are. That's the main thing. So which part of the mind? Well, you know, he talks about sensory consciousness and mental consciousness. We learn about this in high school, the middle scope. And we learn just great detail about the way the mind functions, what it is, and what are the parts of our mind that are the cause of suffering. It's not all of them. Luckily, not all of them, because one of his teachings is that our mind, and these are marvelous, and especially taught in Tantra, that our mind is pure in its nature. Our mind is pure in its nature, and that the causes of suffering, which are all the delusions, all the misconceptions, all the neurotic emotions. So clearly, if they're the cause of suffering, and we can get rid of suffering, we have to clarify what those causes are, which means we have to become our own therapist, like Lamrim, as he says, and identify precisely, and I mean precisely, not vaguely, precisely in our own mind, these neurotic states of mind, these delusions, these misconceptions, these disturbing emotions, these afflictions, all these different terms. This is very clear. That's our job, being a Buddhist. So the job of being a Buddhist, once from there, is to then gradually get rid of the delusions. But luckily, we've got the other parts of the mind there. This is the whole point. And this is our virtues. This is the virtues, the goodness, the clarity, the kindness, the love, the compassion, the intelligence. That's the stuff that's the core of our being. And that is the source of our happiness. How amazing. Buddha has identified this. There's some parts of our mind are the causes of suffering, and some parts are the cause of our happiness. And we can get rid of the suffering ones and grow the happiness ones. Wow. He's pretty straightforward. He's not complicated. It's not complicated. That's the meaning of the word Buddha, rid of all the rubbish, full of all the goodness. So from beginning, junior school, entry level, you're beginning to do that job. Well, he's saying that the mind is so driven by these ridiculous delusions, and it's so hard to seat our mind, and it's so hard to see our mind, that's more advanced practice, to start to see your mind. So what are you going to do first? Control the servants of your mind. Junior school, baby. Don't kill, don't steal, don't follow these crazy delusions. Don't follow the crazy delusions. That's junior school. Control your body, control your speech, calm yourself down, discipline, don't jump on too many boys, don't steal too many things, don't kill too many people. And then gradually, as you practice, you start to extrapolate, and you go, well, I better not, perhaps I also better not, stuff in 14 pieces of cake. So that it's control your body, control your speech. Why? Because they're driven by delusions, and delusions are causing you suffering. So the whole point of karma is for your sake, because you're sick of suffering. That's junior school, entry level, grade 1. Live according to vows, take refuge, and then purify your karma. That's the main first level of practice. And what that does is eliminate the first kind of suffering, which is future suffering, the gross kind of suffering. That eliminates being harmed, lied to, stolen from, killed, lower realms. That controls the first level of suffering, which is expressed in the First Noble Truth. Then you get to high school, and you start to get to the root of the problem, which is your delusions, the mind itself, and that gets rid of the second kind of suffering, which is called the suffering of change. And that's by you subduing attachment, subduing effectively the main cause of suffering in daily life. Attachment, this bottomless pit of neediness, this emotional hunger, this dissatisfaction, this manipulation, this control freak inside us, this junkie inside us that is frantic to get only what the fantasy I wants. That's the main cause of our suffering day to day. So beginning to harness attachment, and therefore, and then the other delusions that come as a result, such as anger and all the rest, then you really become your own therapist. Then you're really on track. You really identified the causes of suffering now, and you begin to harness them. Pretty amazing. And what's the consequence of this? Renunciation. Now you've stopped the second kind of suffering, now the suffering of change, which is what we call happiness. You're already an amazing person, subdued, content, fulfilled, not neurotic, not depressed, don't blame anybody else, less angry, less attached, less negative, more joyful, more happy. Wow, that's what we want. That's just high school. Now you go on to university and you add the compassion wing to the mix. You start looking at the rest of the world. Oh my God, we're all in the same boat. How could I not but help them? Now I know what suffering is, and now I know its causes. Now I can help others. Wow. So you add bodhicitta. Then you get to then you get to the 6 perfections, and you keep perfecting the first 4 of those, which is perfecting the compassion wing, and you perfect the last 2, which is perfecting the wisdom wing, and you graduate. Then you can leap into the postgraduate. So what you do here at the most advanced level, you controlled your body, controlled your speech, you controlled your mind. You've got you're now qualified. You've got the 3 prerequisites, the 3 principal aspects of the path. The first one is renunciation. That's controlling your body, speech, and mind in junior school and high school. You've got that down, at least a sincere appreciation of it. You've got the next one, which is bodhicitta. And you've got the third one, which is realizing emptiness. You've got these 3, the 3 principal aspects of the path. They qualify you. You've done, in other words, junior school, high school, and university. You're ready to get to postgraduate now. That's the logic of it. So now what do you do here? You can keep practicing. Nothing changes. You keep working on your mind. That never changes from here to Buddhahood. But your emphasis is different. Your wisdom is different. You're more subdued. You're more sophisticated. You're more brilliant. You've got compassion. You realize you've got some semblance of understanding of emptiness. You're much more qualified, and you can see things in a much more nuanced way, more sophisticated way. And now this path is a skillful ability to utilize all the poison, in particular attachment. And where that's come from, it's a technical point. Lama Yeshe says Tantra is technical. It's highly technical. And what that means is that these yogis, even before the Buddha, these brilliant, great Tantric yogis, these Hindu yogis, they're the ones who discovered the way the body is constructed. It's all still based on Buddha's teachings. We've got gross body, which is this bag of bones here, which is inextricably linked with our gross consciousness, which is the sensory consciousness, the grossest level of our being, which is all we think about in our culture. Then we've got subtle consciousness, which is inextricably linked with the subtler physical energies. And these are what can be used by the Tantric yogis. So in this model, in this subtle consciousness and subtle body, the physical level of us, is the 72,000 subtle channels, like the subtle nervous system going through our entire body. Coursing through these subtle channels are these subtle wind energies, or prana in Sanskrit. Millions of different wind energies. And all these wind energies, as His Holiness says, are inextricably linked to our different states of mind. This is a very precise kind of way of seeing things, and utterly sophisticated and amazing. These Tantric yogis are they're skillful at this. So this is not, of course, how we think. We do not think of our mind running through a bunch of channels in our body combined to a bunch of wind energies. It seems very old-fashioned, but that's the Vajrayana model, and the great scholars are understanding this. And so the point is that what they found is when we can get, this is in general in Buddhism all the way, even back at the sutra practice, if we can get our mind to a more subtle level, beyond the conceptual and beyond the sensory, even in the sutra teachings, when you get shamatha, you're doing this, the principle is there, that we've got these subtler levels of mind, subtler levels of cognition that we don't posit as existing in the West, but we're gradually thinking might be existing now with all these amazing discussions with the Dalai Lama the last 30, 40 years. You know, Western modern scientists are now opening their eyes, you know, which is fantastic. So we study in the sutra teachings, even the Hindus come up with this one, the shamatha technique, that you can get your mind to a subtler level. And when your mind's at a subtler level, it's super, super, super more brilliant, more qualified, more clear, more vast, more intelligent, more capable of doing what? Cutting the rubbish from the mind and seeing reality, realizing emptiness. That's what you do in the sutra teachings. Now, in Tantra, it's the same principle, but speed it up. They found, you know, that the way this body is the way that this body is a product of attachment. This is the Buddhist description of the universe. We all know that humans haven't been here that long, you know, so that if we think that the mind is beginningless, and we also think that human minds are beginningless, human states are beginningless, and hell beings are beginningless, and God beings are beginning us, all that, then clearly we have to ask the question, well, if we were born a human before this planet, well, that's interesting, where do we live? We have to ask that question. They don't state it like that in the lamrim. But they talk about how previous human states, human state of mind, not the body. This is an animal body, basically. We're into very degenerate times. We're born on a planet looking like a bunch of apes. It's a really degenerate time right now, according to the Buddhist view. In the much bigger view of their history, not just the Western history, you know. So the human planet, a human mind, what characterizes a human mind, this is Sutra teachings, what characterizes a human mind is virtue. This is a very fascinating point, is virtue, goodness. And all that virtue is rooted, virtue, kindness, compassion, is, if we analyze it, it's rooted at some level of understanding of dependent arising, of interconnectedness. So now, we can see when our mind is driven by serious attachment or anger or depression or jealousy or anxiety, they're the voices of ego grasping, the root delusion. And that means our mind is narrow, fixed, tunnel vision, can't see past our own nose, cannot see past our own needs. So the degree to which we are suffering is the degree to which we're caught up in those delusions. Well, that's also the animals. That's also any being. The Buddhist view of the mind refers to all beings in samsara, from hells to spirits to animals, humans, gods, anti-gods, form and formless beings, all the way. And the Buddha is a being who's perfected this model, rid the mind of all the rubbish, and has now perfected the goodness. So this model of the mind refers to all beings of the universe, not just humans. So human qualities, animal and spirits and hell beings are intensely, unbearably suffering beings whose experiences are dominated by delusions and intense, unbelievable levels of suffering. Even if we look at this tantric model of the physical world, you know, we could argue that a hell being, we've all got the four elements, okay? This is from Tantra. We've all made of the four elements. We're different configurations of the four elements. So if you think of that, the hell beings, this most intensely suffering level of beings, dominated by, as a result of heavy negativity, heavy anger, heavy harming. They're living in the most intense suffering of mental suffering. You could argue that because all minds are conjoined with the four elements. So depending on the karma you create, the four elements are then configured. So hell beings, you could argue, have bodies of fire. Spirits, you could argue, have bodies of air. They're these disembodied beings, like ghosts who float around. Animals are predominantly physical. Look at them and look at humans. We're similar to the animals, similar to the apes. But before this planet, the human body, they never give you proper years. They just say eons ago. They're very vague about time sometimes. They're very accurate when it comes to precision about the mind, but a bit vague. They talk about arm lengths. So they're very vague about things like that. So they say when the human mind, before this human birth on this physical world that we call the planet, the earth, this planet, the earth, it was a more sophisticated level of humanity. In other words, that we only could access our virtues. The delusions were there, but they were hidden. What predominated was virtue. So now that's like a God realm. A God realm being, as a result of lots of virtue, has a body made of subtle light. Their elements are so pure because the mind is pure, and the mind purifies the elements, or the mind, pollutes the elements and gives you a suffering rebirth. All this is explaining in karma. So a human body was probably more like a God realm, except we had access to intelligence. The gods are just blissed out. Then they've got no intelligence in a way that are so blissed out in their happiness they can't see past their own noses. They're not harmful, but that karma runs out. Now, a human before this planet, which of course this is like science fiction to us. But if we're taking this Buddhist view seriously, that our mind is beginningless, we've got to think, where was it before this planet? We've got to ask that question. We weren't all in the hell realms. 1.5 of us might have had a human birth if we were fortunate. So what would we have been like? Well, it was more like a pure land, a subtle light body, because the physical energy we have is configured by the mind. As Lama Zopa says, this is explained very clearly in the Kala Chakra Tantra. There are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Internal is mind. External is the physical. So, and then, as they say in Vajrayana, the subtle body and is the wind energies coursing through these 72,000 subtle channels, inextricably linked with the different levels of our different states of mind: love, compassion, anger, jealousy. There are thousands of them, all got their own wind energies, and the boss of these two is the mind. So, as Lama Zopa says in the Kala Chakra Tantra, when the mind, say, is just angry, slightly angry, the mind, not even the words, mind, naturally it puts a tendency in the mind to keep being angry. That's what karma is. But also it pollutes those wind energies. So your Tibetan doctor can feel that. She takes your pulses and she can feel exactly the imbalance of certain winds, and she can see exactly that that's linked to your anger. That's why the pollution, that's why the disruption. Well, that's now, but the anger will keep growing. That'll keep polluting your wind energies, and eventually that manifests as sickness. It's the imbalance of the winds gone berserk. That's called sickness, people. What's caused it? Your delusions. Then eventually, in turn, it eventually impacts, and you get a suffering body, like in a lion realm or whatever. And then, or eventually, long-term, really long-term karma, that negative energy, the anger energy, collected with everybody else's other angry energy, that impacts upon the wind energy, which impacts eventually externally on the wind elements of the elements of the external world. And that's how come you have, weather disruptions, pollution, earthquakes. There's no creator making these things happening. The physical world is the manifestation of of the actions of all those sentient beings experiencing that physical world from 47 eons ago. Nothing goes astray. We are literally the creators of all universes. This is not a joke. It's literal in Buddhism. Of course, we've got to think about it. A bit different from our model, isn't it? So humans, before, we were more subtle mind. The growth, the attachment and the anger were there, but they were more subtle. They were behind because virtues predominated. That's the characteristic of a human mind. So we had brilliant intelligence, if we were so lucky to have one of those births, which we must have had. Incredible intelligence. They lasted a long, long time. You can get enlightened easily because there were no disturbances. You didn't have the five senses. You didn't have attachment. So guess what you didn't have? You didn't have a gross body. So what has caused this gross body with five holes that demand feeding, that is driven by attachment? Well, it's literally the creation, like the karmic evolution of attachment. Attachment began to grow gradually. And that began to pollute the wind energies, which slowly, literally evolution, it begins to grow holes. This hole here, the sense of the tongue consciousness, ear consciousness, eye consciousness, and the other bits and pieces hanging out and sticking in all the body and all the bits and pieces. So this is literally the creation over countless lifetimes of attachment. Countless. No one did it to us. No one made us. There's no creator. We're the creator. Our own actions are the creator. But we're as thick as posts, we don't realize it. The lamas always say that the reason bodhisattvas have such compassion for suffering sentient beings is not even that we've got ignorance about ego grasping, ignorance about ultimate reality. That we've got ignorance of cause and effect. This is something completely unknown on the planet. Cause and effect meaning we create our own reality. It's a pretty subtle point. It proves emptiness. So these great yogis have discovered that because this is this energy of ours, physical and mental, is driven by attachment, it is the product of attachment. This entire physical world is the product of attachment. What is the physical world? It's the five sense objects, isn't it? Stuff that you see, taste, touch, smell, and listen to. And who created all that? We did. This is our karmic appearance. Everything we meet and see out there is our karmic appearance, as Lama Zopa says. It's our own creation, every single tiny millisecond of it. So these great yogis have discovered there's something brilliant about attachment energy, because we've got this body of attachment. So we notice, don't we, that when you do have contact with a sense object, it does trigger pleasure. Now, we've got to learn about this back when we study low rig in the sutra teachings in the middle scope in high school. This is why we have to have all the three prerequisites. You can't get renunciation if you haven't done high school. You can't get emptiness and bodhicitta without renunciation. No way on the planet. So here we have to learn about the mind. But when we learn about the mind, this is fundamental to understand. We learn about the three categories of states of mind: positive, negative, and neutral. or the mechanics, like I like to call it. Well, one of the mechanics of our mind is odd to call it this, but it's called feeling. It's not the way we call it. It's not the equivalent of emotion. Well, she's feeling something. It's very technical. It's like we only have three, based on this type of physicality that we have, based on this kind of body and mind we have, based on the samsaric view of the mind. Excuse me, hells and up to gods. We have either a pleasant feeling, right? Pleasant feeling, or we have unpleasant feeling, or we have neutral. Let's forget the neutral here, quite literally. They are there, but we don't worry about those here. So we know that we are driven by the yearning for only pleasant feeling. So pleasant feeling is a simple word which is equivalent to happiness, literally, okay? Not to mention ecstasy, rapture, and bliss, which you read out in the holy saints might talk about that. You might read some people who had some bliss with their boyfriend last night, but we don't often say that. I had ecstasy last night. It's more often the saints talk about ecstasy and rapture, which makes us kind of a bit depressed. Oh, I've got to become a saint to get rapture? What a bore, you know? I'd rather do it with a boyfriend. So we know all these words. So they're just all variations of levels of pleasant feelings. I mean, this is a literal point. So now it's in the category pleasant feelings, happiness, joy, rapture, ecstasy, whatever degree of it you're fortunate to have, is in the third category as a state of mind. It is not what's called a negative, non-virtuous, neurotic, deluded, ridiculous state of mind that's the cause of suffering. Nor, crucially, is it a virtuous, positive, appropriate, beneficial, useful state of mind that are necessarily the cause of happiness. This is a very specific view in Buddhist psychology. Don't just hear these words in the way we hear them, like punitive and kind of weird. There's very technical meaning. So then feeling, a pleasant feeling, then is in the category called mechanics. It's just a natural thing that occurs. It doesn't have a characteristic of being negative, and it doesn't have a characteristic of being positive. It's not in that category, either of those categories at all. So then we know about attachment. Attachment is this emotional hunger that's yearning for those pleasant feelings. So because when we get the cake, just the cake, we know technically when you get the cake and it meets the tongue, the cake goes in this hole here, not this one, we're very familiar which right hole it is, this hole, then we know before even that already the mind is excited. So you're anticipating, there's some pleasure in the anticipating because your mind's very creative. We imagine the cake and think about the cake and wait for the cake and anticipate the cake. All the excitement is there, but you got to get the cake. You're not happy with just the anticipation. You got to get the object. So we know when you have the object, what does it do? There's no question. It triggers a pleasant feeling. This is explained so beautifully in the Buddhist teaching, so technically. It triggers a pleasant feeling. So all the other parts of our mind, the attachment and the intention, our attention, concentration, all the other mechanics are all working overtime, you know, to get us to get up, walk to the thing, go over there, get the cake, take it out, put it on a plate, the eyes looking, the ears, no ears aren't involved. Your tongue's waiting for the happiness to happen. The touch already is there. The eyes are working away. All the other thousands of parts of our mind, most of them are not virtuous, by the way. There's rarely the thought in there, I must get this cake to offer it to somebody else. There might be, which means there's a bit of virtuous mind popping its head in. Most of it's attachment that drives the whole process, and everything else follows the attachment. And you get the cake in the right hole. And why? Because you're waiting for that pleasure to come. Well, pleasure does come, okay? Now, when we start to hear Buddhism, and we've got to give up attachment. And when we think of attachment, we think of the pleasure. So we conflate attachment and pleasure, literally. So then, as Lama Zopa says, when you hear you've got to give up attachment to get happy, we go, oh, I've got to give up my heart. I've got to give up my happiness. We're so depressed. And then we misunderstand Buddha and we become completely boring people. Oh, would you like some cake, Robina? Oh, no, I'm renounced. Would you like some tea? No, thank you. Would you like, no, thank you. I don't care. So you become a nihilistic, boring person. That is not based on understanding attachment, and it's not understanding Buddha's teachings. And that's our gross understanding because we haven't got it proper, the definitions of these different states of mind. Without all of this, you can't understand Tantra, people. Forget it. I mean, forget it. So you've got to know what attachment is. You've got to distinguish it from pleasure. That's right there. That's straight away. Crucially important to understand that. There's nothing wrong with pleasure. Lama Yeshe would all the time, when he saw these pathetic, self-piteous hippies looking long-faced and thinking we shouldn't have sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and give it all up and become a holy Buddhist, he never stopped trying so hard to get us to have some kind of happy feeling. He'd have parties. We all think Lama Yeshe loved parties. Lama Yeshe loved cheesecake. Lama Yeshe loved picnics. No, he's trying to pick us up from our self-pity misery, just to give us permission to have a happy feeling. He said, you people know how to be miserable. You don't know how to be happy. And it's true, because we get all these neurotic misconceptions about what happiness is. But of course, it's reasonable to have those misconceptions, because as far as we're concerned, happiness and attachment, the experience of it, the experience of them is that they're virtually the same. So we've got to have this model of the mind, this new model of mind, and study it properly to begin to distinguish between them, even intellectually. When we do, it's a revelation. So the great Tantric yogis have found that you can utilize that pleasure, that bliss, when it's, first of all, in the sutra teachings, and Lama Yeshe talks about it in Mahamudra. He gives all the description of some of the qualities you'd have if you just get shamatha. And this is invented by the Hindus well before the Buddha. The mind will be, he said, you will not believe the bliss, the rapture, the ecstasy. He uses those words, that your mind will just naturally experience. You're having accomplished to some degree even this shamatha, this calm abiding, where you've controlled to some degree the gross sensory and the gross conceptuality. Then your mind just naturally is blissful. But the attachment is also calmed down. So everybody, when you read, anybody who's had any proper meditation experiences will all say, and the greatest yogis say, that that bliss, that rapture, that ecstasy has got nothing to do with attachment. It's just the nature of your mind. It's just the way your mind is. And it is peaceful, calm, peaceful. We do not ever associate rapture with calm, do we? Even the slightest bit of bliss you have with the crummiest boyfriend, the nicest chocolate cake, the best marijuana, you never talk about being peaceful. But the mind can only be that when temporarily even the delusions and the conceptuality and the sensory consciousness have ceased, which is what you get in the sutra practice. Well, the yogis just have enhanced that, have discovered there's something about the bliss that is triggered by contact with the best sensory objects on the planet, which is the best bliss on the planet. When that bliss is combined with concentration, it functions as like a reverse rocket boost, not to go out, but to go in. And the mind enables the mind to get to the very subtlest level. Why do you want to get to the very subtlest level of mind? Because that's the microscope of your mind. The microscope that you get to with the sutra teachings is much grosser. The microscope you get when you combine bliss with concentration in Tantra is the subtlest microscope. That's called the clear light consciousness. And that's why we talked about, didn't we, last week, why death is what the yogis have been waiting for. Because this whole death process is there in complete control of it. And I've discussed all this in those sadhanas of the highest yoga tantra practices. You're training your mind going through these 9 stages, this gradual deconstruction of 8 stages of the mind, training your mind to get to the clear light level, training your mind, faking it till you make it. The greatest yogis can actually do it. So it's technical. So now the only person who can generate that level of bliss without, as Lama Yeshe puts it, the mind going berserk, meaning a person who's driven by attachment, is a person who's given up attachment. Then you think, well, if a person's given up attachment, how can you possibly utilize attachment? Well, it's not complicated. That's when you understand that bliss, happiness, pleasant feelings is not attachment. It is a result for us. That pleasant feeling, the only way we know how to trigger pleasant feelings, we know about pleasant feelings, but the only way we know how to trigger a pleasant feeling is by contacting a delicious object. That's driven by attachment. That's a samsaric method. So naturally, we assume pleasure is what you get when you get what attachment wants. The cake, the boy, you name it. No, Buddha says, that's okay, but that happiness, it is a pleasant feeling, but it doesn't last. That's a fact, it's scientific truth. But he says, I found a method, this is just a sutra teaching still, he's found a method to get the mind to have blissful feelings without need of an attachment object. And that's what you can even get in shamatha, just right there. But Tantra is even a more sophisticated method of that you actively engage in a sensory object, actively, because you can speed it up. You actively engage in a sensory object, which will definitely trigger bliss, and you're able to combine that with your concentration. You do it in meditation, you know, and then that gets the mind to the subtlest level. But the only person who can do that is give up attachment. So if you've given up attachment, how can you use it? Well, it's not complicated. I'm about to tell you again, and I got lost. I'll go back to it. So when you have given up attachment for chocolate cake, it's not complicated. When you've given up attachment for chocolate cake, meaning hunger, manipulating, greedy, grasping, frantic, get it in, want more, never satisfied until you vomit, which is we're all variations of that. When you've given up attachment, when you're no longer in the thrall of attachment, when you've deconstructed attachment and you no longer believe in it, you know, it's a rotten, stinking, disgusting lie, you no longer need it, you've gone past it. So but your tongue does not fall out of your mouth. Your senses don't freeze up. You've still got senses. You still have the capacity for pleasant feelings, but you are now capable of eating that cake without attachment, but it still triggers the bliss. And in fact, the bliss is 30 times more powerful because the attachment destroys the bliss for us, like pigs. When we enjoy pleasure now, we just are like pigs with respect to pigs. But a person who's got no attachment has even 100 times more pleasure because it's not polluted by attachment. There's no fantasy, there's no expectation, there's no greed, there's no grasping, there's no dullness, there's no stupidity, there's no hunger. They're already blissful. So the cake is a bonus. And by contacting the cake, and that's just the analogy for any sense object, bliss is naturally triggered. It's just the function of the senses. When it's got contact with an object, it triggers bliss. So it's technical. This is sutra teachings, okay? I'm adding a bit onto Tantra, but if you don't know the sutra bit, you can't understand Tantra. It's just like a mystical nonsense to say, how can you use bliss? How can you use attachment? It's just sort of fantasy, you know. So if you want to practice Tantra, live in vows, control your body, control your speech, don't jump on 14 boys, control eating the cake, go to high school, learn about the mind, give up attachment, give up the delusions, become blissful. Then you go to bodhicitta, then you realize emptiness, then you're ready. They're the 3 prerequisites, you know. Any questions from all that, please? Any question? Any kind of last week even, doesn't matter. Any question?
There are no questions in the chat, but it looks like Sam has a question.
Oh, Sam, ask me, darling. Yes.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teaching. So we talked about the prerequisites of
Yes.
renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness.
Exactly. Yes.
Can you speak more about the tantric vows and other vows that and their role in the process?
Okay, I won't talk about the tantric vows, no, but I can talk about the bodhisattva vows, and I can talk about the lay vows, because there are these 3 sets of vows, are they not, in relation to these three, well, no, not quite the 3 principal aspects of the path. There are 3 sets of vows, but there's slightly different levels. So the first level are related to junior school and high school, where you control your body and speech. They're to help you control your, just not kill, not steal, not lie. And then you've got the bodhisattva vows, and their main emphasis is to help you help others. And the third level, Tantra, they're also mainly, I mean, if one were to read them and one takes initiation, when you read them, they are again very technical. The first lot are really all about, you know, keeping on track about your mind, not giving up bodhicitta, not giving up emptiness, not being mean to sentient beings, not, you know, perfecting your guru devotion, as many, not directly to do with it, the technical side. Some of the vows are the technical side, you know, but they usually seem quite abstract, actually. So, but the more broad point, though, Som, and this I think is a great question, so let me talk about it. Why vows at all, you know? So I think this is really, again, using ordinary analogies. It's so incredibly down to earth, and it's quite surprising, but we will understand what I'm saying when I say it. So, you know, I think any skill we learn, any skill like play tennis, make a cake, drive a car, you know very well, it's quite precise. You get lots of technical details, you get lots of technical instructions. You do this, you don't do that, you don't do this, you don't do that, you must do this and do this. And it's very technical, and it's laid out very precisely. Now, what else are those instructions other than a vow And a vow is a decision to refrain from something. And another one is called, we call it a commitment. And a commitment is a decision to do something. Now, I'm not being sarcastic or even silly here, but because we're so used to religion, do you understand my point? Coming from God and coming from Buddha and telling us what to do. And if you do it wrong, you get to hell. All this kind of way we talk, including Buddhists, that we're being superstitious about it. So what is the point of the instructions when you drive that car? Forget even the road rules, Som. Look at the number of things you vow not to do when you learn to drive the car. You absolutely will never put your foot on the accelerator at the same time as the brake. You will never put the wheel left if you're turning right. I mean, there must be hundreds of things that you've quickly learned. Are you getting my point now, Som? These are vows, but no one calls them vows. But in other words, what's the reason you learn them? So you can be a good driver, baby. So all Buddha's vows, and surely Muslim vows and Christian vows and every other vow, the same as tennis vows and car vows, are to help you do a better job. So what are you trying to do here? You're trying to become a better person. So the very first level of vows, you control your body, you control your speech, you don't kill, you don't jump on 14 partners, you don't say words that aren't wrong. Not because in Buddha's view, because Buddha said no, because that'll harm you. So it's like just if you turn the wheel left instead of going right, it'll harm you. So they're exactly for this purpose. They are to help you calm your body and speech down and not be driven by attachment, which will harm you. That's the first kind of vows. And they're the fundamental, they're the ground, they're the root. You've got to have them. That's where you begin the real work of subduing your body, speech, and then eventually your mind. Now, vows and commitments in these instructions are not about the mind. They're all about behavior. They're about body and speech. So but in the end, their job is to help your mind do the job of getting renunciation. The next level, bodhisattva vows, the first kind, are all to help you stop suffering. They say don't kill, don't steal, but the point of those is those actions, because they're so heavy, because they harm others, will harm you. The main purpose behind those is to protect you from not suffering in the future. Now, the bodhisattva vows, there are many more of those, and there's like 18 root vows and 46 secondary vows, and they're still the same. Don't do this and don't do that. But these are more radical, and their emphasis is not on don't do this because it'll harm you, but don't do this because it will harm others. So it's more expansive. Based on the logic of keeping the first lot, you now can open your eyes, and now you attempt to refrain from certain actions because it will prevent you from helping others. And you even now, this level of vows, which are more expansive and more marvelous, there's even a vow there where if it is truly for the benefit of others, you will break an earlier vow. That's why the greatest bodhisattvas can kill, steal. I mean, we know this even at a relative level. We talk about tough love. If you're a parent, you are allowed to shout at your child. You know you are, because it's driven by compassion. So here the motivation is the key point. And that's where you can't tell who people are. The first one is you just don't, there's no wriggle room. You don't kill, you don't steal, you don't jump on the wrong partner. You get control, you discipline, you harness your crazy energy. Now you're more sophisticated, and now your emphasis is to help others. So the vow, for example, the 46 secondary vows, they're all related to the 6 perfections of the bodhisattva. So the first lot are to help you practice generosity. So there's a vow there, for example, because the key point of the bodhisattva vows is what's best for the other person. The key point of the lay vows is what's best for you. You protect yourself. You keep away from trouble. Here, you're more brave, you're more spacious, and now what's best for the other person. And these vows force us to think that through, And the commentaries are very detailed and very delicious. They really give you great insight into how we have to learn to think. So there's a vow, for example, where let's say, you ring me up for dinner. So come for dinner, Robina, and I'm just being lazy. I can't be bothered. Oh, Som, another day, darling, but I'm just being completely bone lazy. I break a vow, Som, because I prevented you from creating the merit of generosity of inviting me for a meal. So in other words, if I'm being proper, I can say no, but I've got to be conscious and it's got to be a good motivation. Then I don't break the vow. Now, but if I'm trying to practice to be like a bodhisattva, even if I've had my dinner, I will say, Som, what a wonderful idea. I'll meet you at 7 o'clock. And I will say yes, for your sake. So it's a very different shift. This is incredible that when we really read the commentaries, it really expands on all of these different vows. They're like instructions of how to be a better person with other people. I mean, initially it sounds kind of naive, but they're profound because we're driven normally by what I want, Do you understand? Now, the tantric vows are more of that, but just more sophisticated. And they're to help us, and some of the vows are related to the subtler energies and what to do and what not to do, etc., etc. So they're all instructions of things not to do in order for you to achieve your goal of becoming a Buddha. So that's it. And it's so logical when we think about it. Do you understand?
Understood. Thank you so much for the wonderful answer.
Okay, good, Som. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
But the other point is this, Som. I tell you, I find this very fascinating. Even in relation to the lay vows, they talk about in the teachings how Buddha, you see, Buddha loves his vows, okay? And they talk about how when you for example, that vows are like a subtle physical energy, a subtle physical form that's visible to clairvoyance. Vows are so powerful. So what a vow, so, when you take a vow, so I've been given permission, for example, by Lama Zopa to give people, lay vows, for example. And I give bodhisattva vows, like to prisoners mostly, but to other people. I've been given permission by my teacher. So that means, so I wouldn't do it in this center because Geshe Sherab is the resident teacher, and the protocol would be that only he can do it. It would be very inappropriate for me to do it in this center, for example. But when there's no teacher in the center, I might do it. So anyway, that's just incidental. But the point is, when I give the vow, I've received these from whom? My teacher. And where they get them from? His teacher. And where they get them from? And if you check it, there's an unbroken chain of real living beings all the way back to Buddha. That's pretty tasty. So when someone sits in front of me and takes those vows on their knee and they vow 3 times, I will never this, I will never that, it's like they're receiving it directly from Buddha via all these people. It's very, very delicious. But the interesting point that I find most powerful, most encouraging, when we look at the teachings in Karma, which is junior school, entry level, right at the beginning, you first commit to be a Buddhist. Let's say you like to be a Buddhist, you take refuge, you take these commitments. And before you even decide to be a Buddhist, you decide to, take Buddha's instructions of how to drive a car. I won't kill, I won't steal. I'll do my best to do those things, refrain from those. But then when I commit to be a Buddhist, I take refuge. And then at the same time, I probably take the vows, or maybe later you take the vows because they're 2 separate ceremonies. Your refuge commitments and then your lay vows, they're separate. So this is the point now. We need to create bucket loads of we need to drop bucket loads of virtuous karmic seeds in our bank vault, because everything we think and do and say leaves an imprint, but we need to make those imprints of virtue really delicious and really powerful and really strong. So at the time of my death, even simply, I'm sorry, wait, I have to have a little cough. So we need just killing one. I need bucket loads of rich, delicious, intentional, karmic seeds of non-killing in my bank vault at the time of death, because one of those seeds will be the one that will determine my next future life. And I want a decent human life, please, at the bare minimum. So I need a good, rich, delicious, non-killing karmic seed. So this is the point about karma. At this very moment, we are not probably killing anything, right? How nice we are. But if our mind is not involved with my action of not killing, and it's not right now because there's no sentient being in front of us, that we have to consciously decide not to kill. So it's only when there's the intention, I will not kill. And when you have the intention not to kill is only when you meet the ant or your ex-boyfriend. Think about this. You've got to have an object there. There's got to be an object, which is called a living being. And then you have to have the intention, I will not kill. And then you have to have the motivation, a compassionate motivation to not kill. Then you sow this, then the karmic seed drops in your bank vault. So right now we're being nice people, but we're resting on our laurels, Som. We're not creating the virtue of non-killing. We're not creating the virtue of not stealing. We're not creating the virtue of not lying. We aren't doing those things, but it's too passive. There's no intention there. Therefore no karma. But if you've got a vow not to kill, this is the Buddha's point, 24 hours a day that you're keeping that vow, even when you're asleep, even when you're in the pub having a beer with your best girlfriend or whatever, you are ticking over 24 hours a day the karma of not killing. And they're the best karmic seeds of all that are enriched by having committed yourself to live in the vow of not killing. So vows for Buddhism are so delicious, so technically very powerful. And basically, as Lama Zopa says, just being good is not enough. We can't create enough merit because we don't have enough merit. Our virtues aren't that strong. But if we live in vows, vows are so potent, they override even motivation and intention. So that I find that very powerful. Do you understand, Sam? Okay, good.
I do. Thank you so much.
Any other questions? No other questions of any kind at all? I don't
Yes,
mind.
Venerable Robina. Anna has a question. She
Good.
asked, who would validate a blissful clear light experience? Would we simply realize the experience, realizing itself, or would a teacher confirm it somehow?
I understand. Well, if it is really a blissful clear light state of mind, then that means you're like that means you're Bach. You've perfected music, basically. And I think you don't need to be validated by that point. But if you have, so that and then a blissful clear light state of mind is so serious, is so advanced, there's no way you could get there without being conscious. So in other words, there's no way you can sit at the piano and play perfect Bach and have to have your teacher validate you did the right job. By definition, you know now, you've internalized your own Bach and you know exactly what you're doing. So at that stage, you don't need validating, I would suggest, because you know what you're doing. But at earlier stages, when you're not confident yet, you're only in grade 1, then you have a certain experience, you need to get your teacher to validate or not validate it. So if you're more advanced, you understand my point here, and I hope you do. It's a very practical question, if you understand my point. Are we communicating here? Any more questions? Any more questions? Any questions of any kind? Back to Tantra. Any questions about Tantra? We'll continue. No, nothing, nothing. Alexis, nothing, darling? No, okay. All right. Okay, so then that was one crucial point to understand the difference between attachment and pleasure. In fact, it's an enormous point. It's so huge that you can't believe it if you haven't studied it, because then you begin to understand the logic of Tantra. Otherwise, it's just utterly confusing. And you'll even begin to understand your own mind right in high school and learn to control yourself and begin to understand your own mind and get some renunciation. Then you'll understand. And that means you've got to study Lorig. You've got to study the model of the mind. It's very clear. And then think about these things, you know. It's way back in high school. But also let's look again. I mean, we went through the, you know, roughly speaking, the 3 prerequisites. Let's look again at these 3 prerequisites: renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And again, looking at the logic of why we need those in order to be qualified to, even without high realizations, but to enter into Tantra and receive an empowerment and to do it, you know, properly. Even, and as, I mean, so first of all, as Lama Zopa says, for most 99% of us, we're not the greatest yogis and yoginis. We will not have blissful clear light experiences. That's highly advanced. You'll get there. But when most of us are faking it till we're making it, and that is not a problem. Do not, and don't hesitate, because you need, this is the point, you need in your mind stream, you need to bring with you to your next life all these tools. You need the lay vows, you need the bodhisattva vows, you need the tantric vows in your mind. So, you know, don't wait. If you wait till you're qualified to have experiences, it's catch-22. You'll never get there. You've got to have these tools in your toolkit and die this life best with all these in your mind stream. So then to be qualified, it means to have at least some semblance of understanding of and genuine wish to achieve renunciation, which means giving up attachment and the delusions and harming sentient beings at the very minimum. That's renunciation. Then in order to, and the next one, you've got to have bodhicitta. Now, bodhicitta doesn't seem much direct relationship to the practice of Tantra. It makes sense to have renunciation of attachment and understand attachment. And absolutely realizing emptiness seems to be very directly related. So why bodhicitta? Well, that's the point. Bodhicitta is the reason you want to practice Tantra. It's the reason you want to become a Buddha. If you don't have bodhicitta, the bliss, even in the sutra practices, and I've heard this, I think it was Tsongkhapa, I don't remember where I got this, and I don't want to mislead you. But, you know, normally, we've discussed this. We have discussed this. The 5th and 6th perfections in the bodhisattva path, before we get to Tantra, are concentration, shamatha, and emptiness, special insight. Now, they're not in their character Mahayana teachings. Shamatha is a Hindu teaching. It's not even Buddhist, but it's taught if its character is a high school teaching, a middle scope, it's a Hinayana teaching, okay? And so is emptiness. Why are they Hinayana? Well, you can become a Hinayana Arhat. How do you become a Hinayana Arhat? Is by getting concentration and then realizing emptiness. So obviously it can't be a Mahayana teaching, it's a Hinayana teaching. But why then is it taught in the Mahayana path in the framework of the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva? Why is it taught at the end of the path? Well, because you need to have it bolstered. You need to have incredible renunciation first. You need to be so disgusted by attachment. You need to have incredible bodhicitta. And the bodhicitta is the key one because that gives you the wish to want to even bother to go further. Bodhicitta is what drives the high beings, what drives them to go life after life after life, perfecting all the first 4 perfections. And then that's what gives them the energy to want to realize emptiness because of their unbelievable compassion for sentient beings. So without bodhicitta, you can lose the plot. Without bodhicitta, the bliss that you will experience, the bliss you experience is so blissful anyway, you can easily forget about sentient beings if you don't have bodhicitta. So it's best taught right at the end when you're perfectly qualified. Renunciation, then bodhicitta, which gives you the wish, the juice. Bodhicitta is the juice that enriches completely all your perfections, and then your realization of concentration and emptiness. Then it will never lose the plot. And so 3rd, of course, is emptiness. So these are perfect prerequisites. Perfect. Now you're ready to start to even sincerely want to take an empowerment, and to understand it properly and technically and do it with faith. As Lama Zopa says, you've got to have faith. It's the main thing right there. Confidence, and you keep your commitments. And the key to success in Tantra, the key to success is living in your vows, is keeping your pure samaya. Samaya meaning word of honor in Sanskrit, damtsig in Tibetan. So they say the thing that qualifies you. And when you understand one of the things I said to Som, it makes sense. If you're living in vows properly, you're molding your body and your speech and therefore your mind into the most perfect shape that's conducive to perfectly use Tantra to help you quickly become a Buddha. Without your perfect vows, without all your perfect understanding, don't this and don't that and don't this and don't that and do this and do this and do this, without understanding all of that perfectly, you can't play tennis properly. You cannot become Bach. It's logical. It's not religious. It's not punitive, because then you've molded your body and your speech and your mind into the most qualified person who can then easily get realizations. And they all say you'll get enlightened in like 15 or 16 lifetimes if you keep your vows and commitments perfectly. That's the criterion of success. It makes sense. If you've done everything your tennis coach said perfectly, the perfect diet, the perfect exercises, everything perfectly, of course you're going to win Wimbledon. It's not mysterious. It's obvious because you've perfected your body, speech and mind into the body, speech and mind of a tennis player. You'll win Wimbledon easily. It's logical. We don't hear it like this. We hear it as punitive and heavy and punishment and reward. We're so childish. You want to practice Tantra? Live in lay vows. You want to practice Tantra? Practice compassion. You want to practice Tantra? Give up attachment. You want to practice Tantra? Study low rig and know the distinction between attachment and pleasure. These are the prerequisites. It's obvious. Then you become a Buddha in a second. You zip to Buddhahood. I don't know what else to say, you people. Come on. I've got this weird face and my mouth hurts to talk. So I'm now having lots of self-pity. So ask me some questions and I don't know, my brain must be frying as well. I don't know what's happened. So ask me some questions. Come on.
Venerable Robina, I have a question
Yeah.
from Megan. Which comes first, the pleasure or the attachment?
Well, give me an example, darling. Give me a simple example in an ordinary experience. And then if we take it a simple example, the question will answer itself. So give me an example. Give me an example of a simple experience, please. Who asked the question? Who asked the question?
Megan asked the question.
Well, so Megan, talk to me and give me a simple example in which there might be some pleasure arising. And so then let's analyze it. And I think the answer will answer itself. The question will answer itself when we analyze it. Where is Megan? She's not here. Are you here, Megan? I can't see you, sweetheart. Christopher, Christina, Nancy, David. She's secret. She's not answering. Here she is. Megan Flower. Talk to me, darling. Sweetheart, talk to me. She's not going to talk to me. Okay, never mind. So so let's see if we can, someone else can come up with a simple example, perhaps. Can someone come up with a simple example? Let's analyze a simple.
Sorry, Venerable Robina, this is Megan.
Oh, there you are, Megan. So give a simple example.
I'm sorry, I walked away for a second and then I just came back. Okay. What were you asking?
You asked a question, does bliss or attachment come first? Or
Yes.
bliss or whatever. So then I said, let's use a simple example of an ordinary example and the question will answer itself. So give me an example of a moment of some experience where these two are playing out. Give me an example.
Well,
A simple down-to-earth example. You can't think of one.
which one, the attachment or the pleasure? See, that's where I'm getting confused because they're sort of like they're the same thing in a way, but
I know, so give me an example of a situation.
But no, for me, from my perspective, they're like kind of like the same thing. I'm not saying that's correct.
I understand that. So that's why I'm asking you for a simple example of a moment in your life when, say, some pleasure would be triggered. So then
I have one.
Example.
I have one.
Good.
I've just made a perfect cup of tea.
Okay, good.
And
Perfect.
it has like some honey in it and it's perfect. And that first sip is very pleasurable.
Right. Now that's right. Exactly right. But what preceded that, Megan?
I know, that's the thing.
No, I'm asking you. Analyze it. Analyze your mind. Okay, what was in your mind before? How did the tea? Okay, good. How did the tea get on the table?
Well, it was like a habit, you know.
No, wait. Who did you put the tea there? Did you make the tea?
Yes, I did.
Okay, good. So at some point, 5 minutes before, perhaps, a thought arose in your mind, oh, I'd like a cup of tea. Would that be right?
Well, the habit part, it would be more.
You have to have some awareness. I don't believe you do.
Well, that's true. Okay, yeah, I hear you.
So
of course.
Sitting there, reading a book, and a thought arose. Oh, well, I'll tell you what that thought was, Megan. That's attachment. No, in fact, it's dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is the energy of attachment. So you're sitting there reading a book and you're getting pleasure from the book. And then after a while, you get bored. This is what happens. This is samsara. So the next thought is, oh, I wonder what's missing. Oh, I'll have a cup of tea. Already, honey, attachment. And that's what's driving the show for the next full 5 minutes.
I believe you.
If the attachment stops, you will turn around and go back to your book. So attachment obviously comes first.
But you know, that kind of a scenario, like for me, it's more like I get up in the morning and it's like, okay, caffeine, I'm having tea. And it's a little bit different than looking like the suffering of change.
No, it's not, darling. Attachment is in your mind every millisecond of the day. Yes. And in fact, it's driving everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do. And indeed, it's habit, Megan. That's the point.
Yes.
Totally.
Well, you were talking about kind of like the suffering of change, I think.
That's what.
And that kind of thing where you're reading and then it's great and then it's not and then you go, what's next?
That's your whole life, darling. But that's your whole life, Megan.
But I guess it's true. It's like you're laying in bed. You're laying in bed, and you're like, I like laying in bed, but it's I got to get up. It's not too much in bed. It sure felt good before.
So what's your point, Megan? You're telling me these.
About
what's your analysis of this experience?
Well, the analysis of the experience is it's made me think about habit actually, which would be more like kind of
habit. Megan, the habit we're talking about is attachment. Everything's habit, darling. That's what karma is.
Yeah. No.
So it's the habit of attachment. And attachment is dissatisfaction. Then it's hankering after something. Then due to your habit, you'll land on a certain object and then you'll go to do it. That's the process of samsara. And that's driven by attachment. When attachment's there, and that's why that's attachment runs the show. And the only reason you pursue what attachment wants is to get that pleasant feeling at the end of it. That's it. It's very simple.
Yeah. I was reading on Facebook. There was. May I keep going? Is that all right?
Absolutely.
Or should we? Okay. So I was reading on Facebook, and there was a teacher whose name I can't remember, but he was an FPMT lineage, but not directly. And in any case, and he mentioned something like, okay, listen, if you're gonna like have attachment, let's say, or do things with attachment, at least try to be attached to positive, so-called positive, or things that
That's right.
are positive.
That's the Bodhisattva path, Megan. The first level, junior school and high school, is doing the mechanics, the unpacking and the unraveling of the process of how we're driven by attachment. And it's only then when you get to the Bodhisattva path where we realize we've still got attachment. So and I would say exactly the same thing as that teacher you're talking about. That this is where you can, and Lama Zopa says, you can use attachment. By now, if you're going to have a husband, you're not going to, if you're not going to go to this, give up sex, drugs, and rock and roll and go to the mountains, but you want a boy, then at least you bring some love and virtue into the mix, and you choose a boy that'll help you practice Dharma, that'll help you increase your own good qualities. It's intelligent. If you're going to be attached to food, eat food that'll nourish you so you can become a Buddha. So that's a skillful means, but that's next level of attachment. You've got to first understand what it is and how it functions, the mechanics of it, which is the first level of practice, which is in middle scope. So
the thing about that teacher was that he was giving, it was really almost like lower scope approach to working with attachment, because if you don't have the view, you know what I mean? Like attachment is based on ignorance. So you can never be even liberated if you haven't figured the view out, like what it's, the view. So his teaching was, forget about the view, just try to channel it into positive stuff. But my question to you was what you thought about that, because you can't even get liberated.
What did you say, Megan?
Well, you can't even get liberated unless you practice the view.
Of course, but why are you saying that now? Because we're discussing attachment here.
Okay.
No, but what?
That's why I asked whether I should stop talking.
No,
I'm going to go on a tangent off the topic. And so let's go back to attachment.
Yeah, so what you're saying is not wrong, but the very first level of practice, we have to recognize attachment for what it is and know what it is and distinguish it from the other things, and then enter the mechanics of it. In other words, how the 12 links work, and then we can go to the Bodhisattva path, having disciplined the attachment, and now we can begin to be skillful and utilize it in our relationships and our job. That's the whole point of the Bodhisattva path. You can even begin to transform these things at a simple level. That's the point. And then at the tantric level, you're most sophisticated.
Tantric level, that's right.
That's
the topic of the talk.
Yes.
So that is so cool. And but I did think that I'm going to think about how you taught that attachment comes before pleasure. That pleasure, that's what I heard you say. So I'll think about that.
But Megan, this is Buddha's teaching. That's why Buddha said.
Okay, that's what I mean. You're
second noble truth.
I consider you to be in the you're Shakyamuni teaching me through the lineage. So I'm not like questioning the teaching. I'm taking it.
No, I know, but I understand. So in the second noble truth, we learn in the second noble truth, Megan, that effectively in daily life, the delusion that runs the show is attachment. So that's and bliss, not even being a delusion, is the end result. That's the whole point about samsara. As far as we are concerned, the only way to trigger pleasure is to get an object of attachment. So it's evident that attachment drives the whole process.
No, that's interesting. So then Tantra, you're talking Tantra now, and then there's not really an object, perhaps we could say, with Tantra, the working with bliss. I mean, since we're talking Tantra,
there's no object.
It's like his attachment, like, the whole thing about Tantra, the worm eats the wood and transforms it. So it's like the attachment is transformed and it's not really there anymore. So then there's not really even an object because of so in any case, attachment. So it is something to think about.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank you.
I will. Thank you so much.
Good, Megan. Thank you, darling.
I'm going to mute myself now.
Good. Thank you for that. Very helpful. Anybody else got any questions?
I have a question, Venerable. So basically, when Megan was saying about having a cup of tea, having this intention, then would it not fall under one of the omnipresent mental factor, which is intention, and which as far as I understand, it's coming from a feeling, like wanting a pleasurable feeling, and then she's having this intention of wanting a cup of tea.
Of course. Well, first, yeah, you're exactly right, Divya. It's true. You're absolutely right. I mean, we all know, if we study the mental factors, as you obviously have, there are hundreds of mental factors all working together beautifully to have any experience, But if we're looking at, so first of all, we look at the intention. Intention is there every millisecond. If you want a boss inside us, the boss is intention. It's there every millisecond. Now, that's where Megan's point of it, that's totally unconscious. You know, it's totally unconscious. We don't notice we're intending to do something every millisecond, but that's exactly what's happening. Of course that's there. And then you pay attention, and then you discriminate, and then you've got concentration. You have many of these mental factors, all the technical side, I call them the mechanics, all working beautifully. But the thing that drives the experience of wanting a cup of tea is the attachment, the dissatisfaction in the mind, and all the other bits, they play their role, Divya, in doing attachment's job. Do you see my point?
Yes, yes, right, right.
You know, if all the mental factors, if all those neutral mental factors were missing, you'd sit in your chair, you might have a hunger for something, but you wouldn't have any means to go any further. You would be an insane person if you didn't have attachment, intention, attention, forget attachment, intention, attention, discrimination, mindfulness, concentration, alertness, all these other mental factors. They're the bits, they're the mechanics that enable you to do attachment's job of getting the cup of tea.
Yeah, I see that. I
See
see
my point?
that. Yes, yes. Thank you. Yes.
That's why it's so wonderful, Divya, that you have studied. It's so marvelous to study this text that initially, of course, is technical. But when you start to put it together and then investigate all the parts of your mind that are all working together to have the simple experience of getting a cup of tea or doing anything, I mean, it's a revelation. That kind of precision, we don't have that in our modern psychology. You know, it's very fascinating. It's incredibly fascinating. This is how we have to understand, how we break down how samsara works. This is the technology of how we keep ourselves locked in samsara, you know. It's totally fascinating.
Yeah,
Thank
true.
you. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you.
And that's why we're going to talk about utilizing all these states of mind in Tantra. Clearly, you can't do it if you haven't studied it. It's absolutely obvious, you know, because it's so precise. These states of mind are so precise, so much subtler than we think. And this is always the problem in our culture for all of us, that we only notice what's going on in our mind when it's really a gross emotion, when it's shouting and yelling and the body's shaking. We only notice our mind when the body is involved. And this is the grossest mistake we make. It's way too late. And that's how we think of our emotional states, as emotional states. That's why we go to the therapist, when we can't handle anything, when all the parts of our mind have gone completely berserk and are screaming and shouting. But that's way too late. This level of clarity and precision we need to use demands controlling your body and speech in junior school, then demands studying the mind in high school, and then getting some concentration, and then doing the unpacking and unraveling, so we can begin to really be our own therapists. I mean, it's not a joke. It's incredibly sophisticated, and it's a revelation. Then we can really start to be in control of our mind. Then we're ready to bodhicitta, and we're ready for Tantra. Definitely. What else, people?
Christina, did you still have a question?
Yes, darling. Yes, Christina, what's happening?
Yeah. Hi. Hello, Robina. Thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about perfection. You mentioned the key to Tantra is pure samaya and keeping our vows perfectly. And I was just wondering.
Best. I mean, you're a Buddha if you do it perfectly. But really,
yeah, well, that's what I was wondering, because we're not perfect.
That's evident, Christina. Come on.
Does that just mean we have to kind of reshape what our definition of perfection is? I mean,
no, I'm just using the word loosely, darling. Christina, come on. Okay. You know perfectly well. I mean, look. I mean, she's a karate girl. She's been preparing for the Olympics, and the Olympics got cancelled. Are you still training?
Yes, still training. They're training for this year, Tokyo.
Well, you think it's going to really happen? I don't think it's going to happen. You think it's going to happen?
We have to be ready, whether it happens or not.
They tell you it's going to happen in August.
They've been telling us, yeah.
Really? You know perfectly well, Christina, even if you're 27th black belt, you know perfectly well you'd never use the word perfection, would you? You'd be probably the most perfect that people would know. But you know that, right? So we use the word, my way of using it, keep your vows perfectly. It's obviously, don't be literal. You've only, when you're a Buddha, then you have perfect, that's why they call them the 6 perfections of the Bodhisattva. So the Buddha is rid of all the rubbish, and Da is when you finally literally perfected your virtues. It's a literal word. So obviously, Christine, talking here, it's all a question of level. Now, but the first point I would suggest about vows, if you don't know exactly all the vows and commitments, how can you ever know you've even broken them? So already that's defeating most of us. So I don't think anybody knows their vows and commitments. Most people haven't got a clue. So but if we at least know them and sincerely wish to keep them and do our practice every day and do the 4 opponent powers every day and like, just like you are with karate, perfecting as much as you can everything your teachers have told you, then you're going to do the best possible. And you've got to know the tiniest detail down now to how big, this way your big toe faces. Everything does count. Details do count. And if anything, vows and commitments are the details of what you're going to, that you're going to be utilizing to turn your body, speech, and mind into the mind of a Buddha. You understand?
Yes.
Okay, darling, thank you.
Thank you.
Who else? Who else has a question? Nobody else.
Ifesha, I'm sure I'm saying the name wrong.
Ifesha, yes, there you are, Ifesha. Ifesha's in Bali. Go on, you go. Lucky Ifesha. She's on her way to Australia, but they got stuck because they're so strict in Australia. Ifesha, where are you, sweetheart? Talk to us.
Her question is, are tantric vows like advanced bodhisattva vows? If so, is it necessary for us to take tantric vows to become a bodhisattva, or is it tantric vows post bodhisattva?
Yeah, post. They are the most advanced level. You can't have tantric vows if you haven't got bodhisattva vows. You can become a bodhisattva on the sutra path. It is a sutra teaching, in fact, but the tantric vows would enhance it, because it's totally linked and rooted. You can't possibly have the tantric vows without bodhisattva vows. And it's the final stages of the Mahayana path. So, you would say that the tantric vows just help you perfect the bodhisattva vows and become the most brilliant practitioner, so you can quickly become a Buddha. I hope that's clear, Ifesha.
Yep, that was clear. Thank you.
Good, darling. Thanks, Ifesha. How's Bali, Ifesha? I'm giving you away. How is Bali? All right?
It's really warm, but it's beautiful.
She's on the way from Baltimore to Bali to Perth, but she's stuck in Bali. You can't complain.
Yeah, from Baltimore to Dubai to Bali.
Oh, Dubai. She was in Dubai for a while, then she chose Bali. I don't blame her. Good. Enjoy it, honey. I'm so happy you're there.
Thank you.
All right, darling. What else, people? Questions? Any questions, people? I've run out of petrol. I'm sorry. It's only 20 past. Look at me. You have to ask me some questions. I'm so sorry. I mean, we've touched on every major point. We have done all that. We've touched on every major point in the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it's been.
Excuse me, Venerable Robina. Sorry, it's Christina again.
Good, darling. Talk to me.
I just wanted to ask a question about Tantra at the time of death, and if maybe you could talk a little bit more about how Tantric yogis prepare for their death if they know they're going to, it's an opportunity to meet the clear light.
Even to use those words like meet the clear light, it's just a very simple process of spending their life. It's like they've trained all their life but doing those sadhanas, and then because the sadhana is constructed in a certain way where when you go through, there's the day. So this is the essence of the sadhanas. So you're doing Tara practice, let's say, and you've done all the various practices, you've done the visualizations, you've done Tara, you've made offerings, you've done requests, and then at some point you bring Tara to your crown, and then you will dissolve Tara into you. So that process is now where you go through, you link that process with the 8 stages of death. You literally go through the meditation as, first of all, Tara, there's a particular process. She dissolves into this, and then she dissolves in this, then this, and you're going through those 8 stages. So you're practicing, here they call it practicing transforming ordinary death into the Dharmakaya, because you go through those 8 stages from the gross sensory level to then the stop breathing, then the subtle level, and you keep getting more subtle, and you eventually get to the 8th stage, and that's called the clear light mind, and that's the subtlest level. It's called the extremely subtle mind. That's the subtlest level of your mental energy conjoined with the subtlest level of your physical energy. So you've done this deconstruction of these 8 stages, and you're mixing it, you're conjoining it with the gradual dissolution, the absorption of Tara into you until eventually you've completely dissolved and you get all the way to the clear light mind. And then you fake it till you make it by thinking this is the Dharmakaya, because that's what the regular clear light mind is, what we've had every time we die. But you've trained all your life and you've even got the concentration. The greatest yogis aren't just pretending it. They actually get their mind to be more subtle, more subtle, more subtle. And they're able to get their mind to the very subtle level. And so they train that moment, I am the Dharmakaya, and that's where they stay in concentration. So they're completely prepared for it. Are you hearing me? They're completely prepared for it. Are you hearing that so far? That's how
I hear you.
And you've trained yourself, not just to die, but you've joined it with you becoming Tara. And each those 8 stages, you're meditating on emptiness. You understand me or not? Technically, can you hear it? You can't expect.
Yeah, I can hear it technically.
Well, that's enough for you, dear. You haven't taken empowerment
Okay.
yet. Can you understand it?
Yes. Mhm.
And then from the Dharmakaya, you then, when you're ordinary death, you're at the clear light mind and you're unconscious if you're not a yogi. At some point, that mind will leave the body, Christina, and then it will go through the 8 reverse stages and end up in a dream state called the intermediate state. You with me? Now, the yogis can do that and transform that into becoming the Sambhogakaya, the subtle light body of the deity. And then out of the bardo, ordinary person, would then go through the 8 stages again and will be reborn in their new mummy's fallopian tube. I know you've got people behind you. Can you concentrate or not?
Yes, I can concentrate.
And then, so you just, first process of death, you transform that into becoming the Dharmakaya. You train yourself to become the Dharmakaya. Then the next, you train yourself to become the Sambhogakaya, which is transforming the bardo into it. And then you train yourself to transform rebirth into the Nimanakaya, the body that can benefit sentient beings. Are you understanding me? That's what the Tantric yogi is doing. And then any person who does a sadhana, any person who does highest yoga tantra sadhana, that's what you're supposed to be practicing. And that's what Lama Zopa said in his book when I read from it last week. That's how you make use of your practice of tantra and training yourself. And then when you'll die with a happy mind, you mightn't be the greatest yogi, but you'll die very well and get a very decent human rebirth. But you're training your mind like you're training for the Olympics. And when you get there, you'll finally do it. It's just all it is.
That was very clear. Thank you.
Good, I'm happy. Next question. Any more questions? What's Claire say? What Claire? Huge thanks. Okay, good, Claire.
Venerable Robina, I have a strange question.
Be strange, darling. It's okay.
Okay. Can the clear, subtle mind be achieved at the moment of giving birth, since it's such an intensely painful and pleasurable experience?
No, because all your senses are involved and you're wide awake and your senses are involved. This state of mind called clear light is all the grosser level of your consciousness, all the grosser levels of your physical body have completely and totally and utterly ceased. You've only got the subtlest level of your mind as conscious. Not possible, no. It might be some pleasure there, but not possible. Doesn't mean there's no pleasure there. Doesn't mean there's not that, but it's your gross body and mind are still involved. So it's a technical answer. The answer is no.
Well, that's very interesting. Also, something that came to mind since we're speaking of attachment and pleasure.
Yeah.
You know, what drives that desire to procreate and go through that gestation period and actually go through birth?
Attachment, darling. That's all.
Can it be a virtuous attachment?
No, wait a minute. Eons and eons and eons of practicing as an animal and a human habit, and that's how this is the desire realm. That's the only way we can get born, isn't it? So due to the karma of a sentient being who's got karma with you from a past life, and then you and needing another man, but these days you don't need the man anymore. You just have to have an egg and a sperm. It's a whole different scenario. But the old-fashioned way of conceiving, we know perfectly well, demands masses of attachment. Otherwise, a boy and a girl won't bother looking at each other, be bored to tears. So they've got to get really excited. Then there's all this business happens, and the egg and sperm come together, and then the fetus comes running, or the sentient being from the past life comes running. Honey, this is completely due to samsaric attachment and karma. There's no virtue in that at all. But you can make it virtuous like everything better. It's not in its nature virtuous. It's called attachment. It's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's grotesque. Please don't misunderstand me. But if you've got virtue and love and compassion and are a bodhisattva, you can have bliss at that time, because this is an amazing little being coming into your body. It's a sentient being you have karma with, you have love, you want to become a good mother. That's another discussion. But the actual way we get birth, in the pure, when we've had a human realm before this, we have a spontaneous birth. You don't need bodies and penises and vaginas and big fat bellies and all that. That's gross. Don't misunderstand me, Petal. I'm not trying to
This is just blowing my mind. It just,
I'm glad I am.
yeah, relates back to what you were saying of how we created the human form.
Yes. For eons, I mean, monkeys do it, honey, baby, and ants do it, bees do it, but we romanticize it because there is attachment there, and attachment brings pleasure. But some women I know will die when they have a baby, so it depends on the mind of the person. It's just very strong.
Can be virtuous,
Honey, you have to make it virtuous, but the technical thing itself is not virtue, it's attachment. Excuse me. This is what we've got to understand.
Gosh, I'm understanding this. Thank you. It's just, yeah.
But you make it virtuous, baby. Given we've got this bag of bones and we need penises and vaginas and wombs and all this business to get a bloody rebirth, then at least we make it virtuous. But we romanticize it in the West, think it's a sacrament from God. Forgive me, Som, and people who believe in God. I'm not trying to be insulting. Well, I know I always am insulting. Excuse me. I'm not freaking you out, Ida. Am I?
No, I'm chuckling. I'm laughing.
Oh,
Thank
I'm
you.
happy. I mean, to put it this way, it is a habit, but if you couldn't get some fun out of it and put some virtue into it, life will be pretty horrible. So just as well you had some virtue. I mean, I know people talk about all the experience of bliss and everything about having babies. I mean, I've never wanted one or had one, so I wouldn't know. But obviously, if you're a good person, Ida, and you've got a strong karmic connection with those beings who came flying into your womb, then you make it virtuous, precious. You make it virtuous. But the action itself is simply a function. You take all the virtue away, all the romanticism away. It's due to eons and eons of attachment. That's it.
It is absolutely wonderful to create life.
Well, I'm so happy for you, darling. You can keep doing it. You have that job. I do not want it.
Oh, I'm done with that. I'm done a long time ago.
Thank you, darling. Thank you so much. Thanks, sweetheart.
Thank you.
Okay, what else, people? What else?
Amy has a question.
Who? Amy.
Amy.
Amy, good. Talk to me, Amy. Good. Talk to me, darling.
Hello, Venerable. Thank you. Actually, I was just repeating, Claire had a question in the chat that we may have missed, and I was curious too by her question. She said that she had heard that Tantra will not be taught by Maitreya Buddha, and if you can please share more about that.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I can't say anything. I can't help Claire. I don't know. I mean, if that's what they say, that's what they say. I wouldn't know. I have no idea. I've read nothing about it and studied it, not at all. So I can't tell you. Yeah, sorry, darling. Thank you though for asking. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
What else, people? I think, I'm going to cut you all short. I'm so sorry. You have to forgive me. But there's nothing more to talk about tonight. I've run out of petrol and this is my mistake. So I think we've had enough. Mary, is that okay? Can you forgive me for that?
We are so honored that you're teaching tonight. Thank you so much.
We've got one more class?
Yes, we do.
One more class. So what I'd like all of you to do, even if you've done it already, if you want one more class, because my sense is there's nothing more to talk about, but I'm happy to have one more class. And I can't be a policeman, but I can only urge you to read John Landau's course notes one more time. Just skim through it, read the points, get the general essence, because I've covered all the points in there. He's done it much more cleanly and nicely in an organized way. But I really recommend you read the course notes and then you have questions for me from John's course notes, and I will happily answer them. That'll be next week, okay? Thank you, darlings. Very much, so kind. And look at Susie up at 3 in the morning, for God's sake, 3:30. The girl's crazy. She's in England. Okay, darlings, thank you everybody so much. And we dedicate thinking this hour and a half, if any use has come from it, then these seeds we've planted, may we nourish them with our virtue and our goodness from this second, so we never give up becoming a Buddha for sentient beings. Jang Chub Sem Chog Rinpoche. Ma ke panam ke yuchi ke panyam pa me pa yang gong ne gong du pa ba shog. That's it, people. Thank you, precious ones. Good night. See you all next week. Thank you, darling.